Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias. Well, I bought another one. Another Rough Ryder Marlin spike knife. Now you saw the burlap micarta handle one with glow-in-the-dark liners, which was the RR2643 a little bit ago. That is this knife here. I now have one with denim micarta handles. Now, before I break out the denim micarta handled one, I want to answer a viewer's question. And a viewer had asked, how does this knife differ from the, I believe it was the RR576 Marlin spike knife, which is this one here. This is the one in the red jig bone handle with the anchor shield on there. And as you can see right away, there is definitely a significant difference in size. Now, I did sort of answer the difference between these two in the earlier video, but I was comparing this knife to a Camillus 697. And the reason I was doing that is because these red jig bone handled knives are patterned after the earlier Camillus 697 knives. And I'll show you those real quick. This is the 697. This is actually the one that the Rough Ryder knives are patterned after. This is the earlier 697. Now, these knives started showing up actually around 1960 or so. This knife is patterned after a knife Camillus made during World War II for the Royal Navy. And so this is a much later knife. A good 20 years later, Camillus came out with this knife, maybe even as much as 25 years later. And you see the blade here. Well, we'll show the blades and everything on the Rough Ryder in just a second. The big difference I wanted to show you here is this is the earliest of the 697s that Camillus made, and what you have on those is a carbon steel back spring. So I believe it's a 1095 carbon steel. Obviously it isn't hardened the same way that you would harden the blade, but the blade itself is still stainless. You have a carbon back spring, a stainless blade. And then Camillus switched from that to a stainless steel back spring as well as a stainless steel blade. And you see that here, you know, a single solid back spring and your stainless steel blade. It's actually listed as stainless steel on there. They were using 440A stainless as far as I know. They might have used 440B, I'm not sure. I know on the S702 rope knives that, you know, the Coast Guard approved knives, they use 440B, but I believe they use 440A in these. And then finally, in the last iterations of the Camillus knives, they came out with this version, and in which you see twin back springs. Notice it's two back springs instead of one single solid back spring. And that's one way you can kind of date these. These were the last of the ones that were made. When they started using the double back spring, I do not know exactly. I believe it was probably around 97, 98, but I cannot say for sure. But these were made in the waning years of Camillus production. And that double back spring that you see there is used on all of the Rough Ryder Marlin spike knives. See there, you got two back springs going on, and then you have the blade up front here. Now, the big difference between the earlier one here, for these, we'll refer to these as the 697 pattern Rough Ryder Marlin spike knives, and we'll refer to these as the 7085 J72 pattern Rough Ryder Marlin spike knives, because this is patterned after the Camillus 7085 J72. Just for brevity's sake, I'll just call this J72. We'll call this one 697. That is not the pattern numbers that Rough Ryder is using. I do not know what they're using. We do know the model numbers they have assigned to them. But that's what they're based off of. Two different Marlin spike knives that were originally made by Camillus. Now, both of these knives are using 440A stainless, which is a good thing because it is a knife used around salt water and stuff like that. But here you can see the difference in blade length. This blade length comes in a little bit under 3 inches, probably about 2 7/8 inches, with about a 2.5 inch or 2 5/8 inch cutting edge. That is on the 576. And then for the marlin spike length, you have a marlin spike length that is right at 3 inches, and the marlin spike locks in place. It is released with the little catch up here, which acts as your lanyard lanyard clevis, I guess you could refer to it, but it's really just the release lever for the marlin spike, and it just happens to have a slot in there so you can use it to attach your lanyard to the knife. And these are obviously in red smooth bone. I'm sorry, red jig bone with the anchor shield. Now, this is the RR576. They also made one in amber jig, which was the RR535. And then they also have the white smooth bone, which is RR577. And then they also made one in Old Yeller, the Old Yeller series, or yellow composition these days with the little badge shield. And that's the 897. Those were the officially released 697 pattern marlin spike knives until very recently when they finally came out with another one. This was in the Highland series, and this is the 2386, and this one features black micarta with red liners underneath the micarta. And now we have gone back to a single back spring. So this is an earlier style of back spring instead of the earlier ones here, which have the double back spring. Which kind of an interesting take on it. So they went to an earlier style back spring on this one. Now, there's also one out there, if you can find it. They're very difficult to find. This was in the Toxic Swirl. There is no number on it. Not sure how it came about or anything, but they were out there, so I grabbed one. And obviously, I like the white smooth bone, so I took a 577, and I had the Mermaid of Warsaw etched on the thing by O'Brien back in 2010. So they've been around for a while. In any case, that's all my 697 versions of the marlin spike knives by Rough Ryder. So now let's break out the latest one I picked up, the 2643 and Denim Micarta. And this, well, it's, you know, the same basic knife as what I had before in the burlap micarta. The only difference is, well, at first I thought the only difference was this was going to be in denim micarta and not have the glow-in-the-dark liners, because it doesn't mention the glow-in-the-dark liners on the box here. But this one also has the same glow-in-the-dark liners on there, and build quality is the same as this one. I went over all of that before on just how well this thing is made. It is built like a tank, which it should be, and we will refer to this one as the J72 style of marlin spike knife. And the difference is blade length here. If you notice here, now the blade length, overall blade length, is 3 3/4 inches. Now, if you remember, so you're looking at 3 3/4 inches versus just under 3 inches, or 2 7/8 inches. Cutting edge right at 2 3/4 inches versus a cutting edge that is just shy of 3.5 inches. So a much larger cutting edge going on there. And this one has a more pronounced ram's foot style blade versus this blade, which is closer to a sheep foot blade. Now, for those who are confused by what I'm talking about, the difference between a ram's foot and a sheep foot is, I've explained this in the past. Basically, if the two if the spine of the knife and the cutting edge of the knife are more or less parallel, it's considered a sheep foot blade when the blade drops like it does here. You notice how it starts around at the very end there and then drops down, and you've got a straight edge across the bottom and pretty much a parallel spine to the cutting edge. That's the sheep foot blade. The ram's foot blade, the blade swells as it gets larger, or the blade swells as you get towards the end of the blade and before it drops down. And so the line is not parallel, if you can see there. This is much wider here than it is closer to the tang, and that's what's referred to as the ram's foot blade. And here's a lamb's foot blade, and as you can tell, the blade kind of narrows as it goes out towards the tip and before it finally drops down. Now all of the blades have a nice straight cutting edge, and all are technically sheep foot blades. The only reason you kind of mention it is if you're trying to describe the blade in a little more detail. This is also could still just be considered a sheep foot blade, but because it is slightly different, you know, there's basically 3 different blades shapes in the sheep foot family: ram's foot, sheep foot, and lamb's foot. But they're all basically sheep foot blades. And finally, let's take a look at the other side here. You have the spike here, and the spike on this one comes in right at 3 3/4 inches long. And if you remember, the spike on this knife was right at 3 inches long. Come on, can we get it there? Yeah, right at 3 inches long. So 3-inch blade, 3-inch spike versus a 3 3/4 inch spike, and a 2 7/8 inch overall blade versus a 3 3/4 inch blade. This is a much more robust blade going on here. And finally, the last thing you have here is this does not have a locking marlin spike. If that's a big deal for you, then you would probably want to go with this one, even though it's got a smaller marlin spike going on for it. However, the locking marlin spike is not that big of a deal. Neither of them have a locking blade. This one also has a screwdriver tip at the back here. So that's a big difference for it. You also have a much larger clevis going on here, so you can more easily attach a lanyard to it. This is also a much heavier knife than what you find in the 697 style of marlin spike knife. Difference in weights, you're looking at approximately 4.5 ounces or 127 grams for the 697 pattern marlin spike knife versus 6.5 ounces or 185 grams for the J72 style of marlin spike knife. So this is a much heavier knife, definitely a bigger pocket full. It does not have a locking marlin spike, but overall I believe this is the better version of a marlin spike knife out there. However, if you definitely need that locking marlin spike, then this is the one to go to. Now, also Marbles makes quite a few different marlin spike knives too, and a few other companies make marlin spike knives. I've got quite a few from all sorts of different places, but in any case, these are really nice and extremely well made. I really like the latest one. I like the Blue Denim better than the brown burlap micarta. I'm really hoping to see more of these knives show up. I would love to see this, or even one of these, either one of these. I would love to see one of these come out in like black mother of pearl, and that would be a terrific thing for Rough Ryder to do, to bring either one of these out in like black mother or pearl or abalone. Abalone would be a terrific thing too. and other materials as well. But I'm hoping to see more of these show up. But which one's better? This one is definitely a more expensive knife. I like the finish on this one quite a bit more. This one is also very tried and true. So, and this one is much lighter in the pocket, and it does have a locking marlin spike. But it's really up to you which one you think would serve you better. They're both very much old school marlin spike knives. There are newer designs out there that feature both locking spike and locking blade. But sometimes old school is the way to go. And these are still going to function quite well. Who uses them? Well, besides people who do sailing, they're also popular among people who do any kind of rock climbing, mountain climbing, things of that nature. Anyone who uses ropes on a daily basis for work and stuff, because the spike is really handy for untying knots. In any case, with that said, I will let you go. And you know what? I will throw in some slides after this to show the differences in size between the J72 style marlin spike knife and the 697 marlin spike knife. So you have a little bit better of a side-by-side comparison of the two. Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with Tobias. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.